Whoops, it happened again. I lost like a week of my life to the paradox black hole, and now I'm making a video to try to justify it to myself. Today's black hole is Crusader Kings 2, a grand strategy game set in the medieval period. As such, its mechanics are centered around politicking, scheming, and incest. Now you may be wondering, hey, why does the map look like that? And my answer is simple. I'm playing on Shattered World because I hate the French. Normally I'd write a little bit more about the game's premise just to contextualize the footage you're seeing, but this is a map game, so that's not happening. You're not going to understand what the fuck you're looking at unless you're already familiar with this game, so just sit back, relax, and listen to this poorly engineered voiceover while I throw shit on screen to hold your attention. While I could heap praise on EU4's UI design, I can't do the same for Crusader Kings. Probably because it's 10 years old. It's not unbearable, just unintuitive, inefficient to interact with, and occasionally broken. However, everything being an inefficient, bureaucratic nightmare is thematically appropriate. Most strategy games are designed for long play sessions, so their audio is tailored to be nice and comforting. Crusader Kings, on the other hand, makes the bold decision to create a unique audio experience by including such lovely sounds as plague victims writhing in the streets, the jump scare crusades, and the best sound design decision in any video game. Every single person that dies will play a death sound. You may have noticed that this chapter of the video has a squeamish warning on it. I am serious. You have about 3 seconds to skip chapters before I play Trampling Elephant Female 04.wave. The medieval period was home to many pioneers in the field of torturing, disfiguring, and murdering their fellow man. And Crusader Kings has a sound for all of them. Ever wanted to hear a spear being shoved through a man's body? How about a woman being boiled alive? Ever seen one of these and thought, hey, I wonder what that would sound like? Well, look no further. It's one thing to have a few ahs or coughs, but when I sentence someone to get Giles Corey'd and I can hear their bones popping out of place while their last gasp of life is forced out of them as an agonizing scream, I get pretty disturbed. Thank fuck there's an option to turn them off, but I leave them on. As psychopathic as it sounds, I still think they're kind of funny. I like to think about how someone had to do Foley for a crucifixion where you can hear the nail being driven through bone, or a garroting where you can hear the soft structures of the neck popping and breaking from the force. There's also the voice actors who could have just gotten away with a simple but instead went above and beyond for their craft by actually setting themselves on fire in the recording booth. The one sound that I could not fucking handle was the event sound. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but this game has so many events, back to back to back, that it was driving me fucking nuts. Thankfully, all of the game sounds are just WAV files in this folder, so I was able to replace it with something shorter and more soothing. In other 4X games, if you see a color on the map, that's a player, not here. In Crusader Kings, you play as a bloodline, not a nation. You control one dude, and when he dies, you switch to his heir. Who your heir is and what they inherit depends on your laws, which are voted on by your council, who you appoint to administer your realm, but powerful vassals expect a voting position. Okay. Slow down. Let's back up a little here. It's tempting to just write off the mechanics as too complex to talk about, so I can get right back to telling you about all the fun incest and murder I've committed, but I'm gonna try. We'll start off with the very basics. Feudalism 101. A king may be the sovereign of the realm, but he does not personally rule over everything. Instead, he grants titles of nobility under a contract of vassalage. In exchange for taxes and troops for his new king's army, this vassal now legally owns his piece of land, including the people living on it. This vassalage contract isn't just a contract either. Everyone in this time period has collectively agreed to just pretend that this hierarchical relationship goes all the way up, straight to God himself. So appointing a noble isn't just giving someone a job, it's establishing that their entire bloodline is metaphysically superior to the common serf. Vassals can also have their own vassals. To help you parse what the fuck is going on screen right now, these are lower holdings, this is a county, this is a duchy, and kingdoms and empires are more of a metaphorical concept, so they won't really come up. In gameplay terms, there's a cap on how many direct holdings and vassals you can manage. And you see this word? I know it's spelled demence, but it's domain. Trust me, I know it's stupid, it's domain. Got all that? No? Well, too bad, because your uncle just died of a throat infection, and now you're next in line for the throne. We gotta move on to advanced feudalism. In grade school, you may have learned that the king's power over his subjects was absolute. This is absolutely not the case. Sure, the king can do whatever he wants, but he'll quickly find that this feudal power structure is actually a very delicate balancing act. Your authority does not come from God, as much as you'd like everyone to believe that. No, your authority comes from strength. Military strength. Armies worked pretty differently back then, but how do I explain this quickly? You can't just raise an army, declare war, and walk in. That wouldn't be a thing until like the 20th century. Instead, you have to declare war, then be like, hey look everyone, we're at war now, come on, chop chop, let's move, march, for the glory of Allah, or whatever the fuck this war's about, we'll get into causes bellies later. Every holding has a troop levy pool, and vassals are obligated to provide a portion of these troops to their liege. But if your vassals don't like you, they might start having convenient logistical problems that render them unable to fulfill their obligations. Does that sound like a bureaucratically nightmarish way to run a military? Well, guess what? That's also exactly how taxes work. How did any medieval kingdom function? Spoiler alert, they didn't. This means that, at the end of the day, your kingdom runs most efficiently when everyone is happy. But if you've ever spent more than 5 minutes around another human being, you'll know that this simply does not happen. Everyone always wants something. Be it land, power, money, or even a piece of that Crusader cussy. God, that is the worst joke I've ever written. I fucking hate myself for that. When your vassals are unhappy, which, like I said, is fucking inevitable, they can conspire with each other in factions. These can turn into open rebellion if they control more troops than you. To prevent this from happening every 12 fucking seconds, you'll need to consolidate power around yourself while also distributing power amongst your vassals in such a way to prevent any one individual from getting powerful enough to overthrow you. If you fuck this up, or if your vassals just smell weakness because you accidentally fired some retinue troops, these factions will present you their demands.
I want mommy, I want milk, I want to be held, I want to be comforted. And if you do not do all these things immediately, I will ruin your life.
You ever seen a history video where they're like, he spent the early years of his reign fighting off revolutions? Yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. Your dad may have sucked off all the important nobles, but that only established their loyalty for him, not the crown itself. If you want their respect, you're gonna have to earn it. Because you may see death in succession as the next step of your playthrough, but not your vassals. To them, every death is not a tragedy, but an opportunity. Every noble title has a long order of succession. The heir to the throne may be pretty happy, but the guy after him? How do you break the news that he's never gonna be king? Oh, sorry son, you're just a backup child. You'll never actually amount to anything. Unless your brother dies, of course, haha. Ah yes, I'm sure this early onset inferiority complex will definitely produce a well-adjusted, non-sociopathic member of the royal family. Yeah, you can just assume that everyone second place and onwards are planning something. But your vassals should help you keep order. I mean, surely they see all this political strife as a net negative for the realm as a whole, rather than a mere opportunity for their own upward mobility, right?
Chaos is a ladder.
Oh fuck, that is exactly how they think. One way to manage this kind of situation is to have as many sons as possible, and then consolidate power around your own bloodline. This works out pretty well, until you die. Now your heir has to deal with his very angry half-brothers, who have all realized just how few stabbings are between them and the throne. And by deal with, I of course mean brutally assassinate, kidnap, or murder every single one of them. Fun fact, the Ottoman Empire worked this principle directly into their system of government. Whereas Europeans could only legally produce heirs from their monogamous marriage, the Ottoman emperor could take multiple wives and even concubines. Any children he produced were legal heirs, since this was an absolute patrilineal system. In other words, the only qualification for being an heir is being a former constituent of the Sultan's spunk. When a new heir inherits the throne after his father's death, he systematically strangles all of his half-brothers to death, one by one, with a fucking piece of string. You can probably imagine that murdering every potential successor before you even got the chance to make your own heirs would be pretty risky. So this practice of royal fratricide was eventually replaced by kafes, where rather than being personally murdered by the new sultan, they're instead forced to live out the rest of their lives in prison, within earshot of where their brother rails the royal harem every goddamn night. Despite this little hiccup, this method of succession was very successful. So while the English royal family looked like this, the last Ottoman emperor was a direct patrilineal descendant of the very first Ottoman emperor. On top of everyone in the line of succession, you also have to worry about pretenders. You see, you have a claim to your lands because you own them, but were you there first? Probably not. You can safely assume that For any given title, there are like 20 fucking people who can say, these lands are rightfully ours, you just stole them from us. And because of that whole thing where everyone pretends their right to rule comes straight from God, they take these claims pretty seriously. You remember that part of Huckleberry Finn where the two con artists pretend they're some kind of estranged European royalty and demand all kinds of special treatment? Yeah, it's basically that. They see themselves as the rightful owners of Bumfuckistan, but nobody else really gives a shit. However, they can still be quite useful as a political pawn. If you want a new piece of land, you could just make up some bullshit and go take it, but your new subjects won't appreciate that too much. Instead, you can invite one of their pretenders to your court, then liberate the holding in their name. This way, you still get the land, but rather than an angry vassal, you have a happy vassal who is now indebted to you. You see, this was never about him or his claim. This was merely part of your ploy to stuff the council with loyalists in order to ram new laws through your political system. The realm is far too vast for the king to manage single-handedly. Instead, he appoints counselors to manage certain aspects of the government. For example, the steward oversees taxes, construction, and the economy. The skill level of your appointee actually has a meaningful effect on how well they perform their duties, so you might want to appoint counselors purely on ability. However, powerful vassals expect a seat on the council. Meritocracy? Never heard of it. I may be a disfigured, inbred waste of space, but I demand a highly technical cabinet position for a field I know nothing about. Good thing we don't do that today, right? This means you'll have to balance your mandatory political appointees with the skill requirements of each job, usually by giving each powerful vassal the job they'd be most qualified for, even though they're not the most qualified for that position. And if you have a genetic dead end on your hands, who has a hard enough time not drooling on himself, let alone double-entry bookkeeping, you can appoint him as an advisor. This is a purely political position, so there's nothing for them to fuck up, but they still get a vote. Depending on your structure of government, certain actions like passing laws will need to be approved by your council. You can hold on to absolute power for a while, but those powerful vassals will eventually force your hand on the matter. Your councilors all have their own ideas on what's good for the realm. If you're ever unsure of which laws to change, just do the opposite of whatever the tooltip says. Oh, you'd rather provide troops than pay taxes? Good one, man. Now pay up. Of course, if you're passing unpopular laws, you'll need some way to get them past your council. You can do something to indebt them to you, and then use that favor they owe to force their vote. You can send bribes or grant titles to sway them to your position, or you can stuff your council with loyalists who will rubber stamp every single bad idea you have. You want to execute this dude? Sure, go ahead. Oh, you want to abolish the council and strip me of my political influence and power? Sounds like a great idea. I trust you won't immediately use your lack of accountability to tyrannically centralize control onto yourself like every other time we've abolished the council. Unfortunately, not every problem can be solved with... Okay, that one actually just solved itself. Not every problem can be solved with politics. Some people don't seem to understand the true terms of the social contract. It was never a transactional relationship of taxes for security. It was always extortionate. Your loyalty or your life. Assassinations are carried out by announcing the motherfucker you want to be unalive, then inviting like-minded individuals to your plot. The more people involved, the more chances you'll get to stage a tragic accident. Their willingness to join the plot is determined by their opinion of you and their opinion of the target. A hilarious way to use this is to choose the seduction focus, then sleep with every single woman in his court, including his wife. The opinion bonus from being your lover is almost always enough to get her to turn against her husband. This will occasionally end in her hating you because you killed her husband, even though she was the one who pushed him off the balcony. Women, am I right? Since assassinations are based on opinions, the more enemies you have, the more likely you are to be assassinated.
Oh, the misery! Every single person is my enemy!
You'll probably learn this the hard way when you're playing as a child. One day, your uncle wakes you up and says, "Hey buddy, guess what? We're going on a boat ride." And since you're a dumbass child, you'll happily march right onto that boat, only to realize that wasn't a joyride. That was an assassination. As a player, you can usually handle one assassination without much incident, as the resulting power vacuum will be filled by a dude who just had a complete schizoid personality break, or whatever the lore excuse is for them being the new player character. After that though, you're gonna have to work hard to put the pieces back together, as subsequent assassinations will cause the whole thing to come crumbling down, until you've had enough and just decide, fuck it, and renounce your loyalty to the false god Allah, and pledge your allegiance to Allah. Yeah, the game's weird about denominations sometimes. But hey, your newfound Shiite brothers are very good problem solvers. Just, don't ask where the Skull Throne came from. Oh yeah, all this shit we've been talking about? That's just the domestic side. At any time during this Sisyphean struggle for control over your own kingdom, your neighbors can smell weakness and decide to declare war. Better raise those levies, bucko, because it's time for war. In order to declare war, you need a casus belli. And by need, I mean need. A casus belli is basically just the excuse you're going to tell other nobles for why you're going to war. Don't worry guys, I'm just here to liberate your oppressed Muslim minorities. Pay no attention to the fact that this war will also solidify my control over the Arabian Peninsula. That's just a happy coincidence. Now, this isn't a discussion. On guard, motherfucker. Like every Paradox game, combat uses a massive tapestry of complex interwoven mechanics that you will never understand in your entire life. The instant you think you understand it, you'll lose a battle to circumstances beyond your understanding, sending you once again into the Valley of Despair. What are the tactical applications of the heavy footman compared to the light one? I have no fucking idea, but that guy has a lot of martial, so he better come back victorious, or not at all. Your army seems to perform better based on your martial skill. At low martial, your army will fail the pigeon intelligence test. While at high martial, I still don't know how any of this works. But now you can participate in battle personally, which is a great way to earn respect and fear from any man, or get permanently disfigured and reviled by all the women. But don't worry, they still have to fuck you. Because marriage, just like everything else, is just a political tool that we've all agreed to pretend is backed by some kind of long-standing cultural tradition. In this time period, women had no rights. Let me be clear, this video is from the perspective of the king, and the king does not care about you beyond your utility to the state. You are either a baby maker or a new expansion of the labor force. Let's tackle these two things separately. A key component of creating heirs is having a female to bear them. For that purpose, the fucking Vroomer, goddamn. For that purpose, anyone with a functioning uterus will do just fine. So our choice of which uterus is a purely political one. Think of marriage as a small link that ties two families together. It's not permanent, or even remotely secure, but that link will automatically create a non-aggression pact between the two families, which opens up further political doors like alliances. You may be used to other strategy games, where you forge alliances based on mutual strategic interests, but not here. That's like third priority at best. It's all about who likes you personally, and how many children you have to marry off. And remember, their happiness is no object. The optimal marriage is between an old man and a little girl, and you gotta make sure you snag betrothals before they reach the ripe old age of 12. That's the wiki's advice, not mine. Just cross your fingers and hope that the son you are grooming as a political pawn doesn't end up on the throne. That wouldn't end well. Hey you, yes you, I know you're almost certainly male, but I've got some shocking news for you. This marginalized status of women, it's actually a bad thing. What, because they're human beings and deserve equal rights? Ha! No, it's because they represent a massive increase to the labor pool. Imagine you've got a pool of 10 people qualified for a position. Their competency is going to be normally distributed, so you've got like 3 or 4 good choices, right? Nope. There's a 50% chance for each one to be a woman, and therefore legally ineligible. And that's just not fair, you know? Oh, what, you need to rest because you are carrying my 7th child? No, fuck you. Go do my taxes. Okay, I think that about wraps up gameplay. Did I miss anything? Yes. Do I care? No. I still barely understand this game, but that's the funny thing about Crusader Kings. I am just as qualified to run a kingdom as any other inbred prince, so being inept at the game doesn't mean you're playing wrong, it's just historically accurate. A massive element of Crusader Kings is the stories you make for yourself. It's hard to stay motivated to keep playing if you haven't lived a long, prosperous, or successful life, but an interesting one? Now that'll keep you playing. I may be an ugly, scarred, disfigured, syphilis-ridden abomination, but I am also a master seducer with half the kingdom wrapped around my finger. But whoops, now my kingdom is fracturing because I haven't been coronated by the Pope yet, and he refuses to do it until I murder the Bulgarians who have just conquered half the known universe. I've been able to get around this before by manufacturing my own investiture controversy, but some dipshit rammed papal investiture through my council while I was in prison, so yeah, he's fucking dead. See what I mean? All these gameplay mechanics come together to make your life just as stupid as actual history.
Yeah, fuck it, jihad time.
I could go on with more stories, but frankly, this video was enough work already, and you can find plenty of that kind of thing in better videos. So that was Crusader Kings 2. This is the only strategy game I've played with such a focus on characters and role-playing, and I think it pulls it off pretty well. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, just do something to help it on the algorithm. You know, a like, a comment, even if it's something stupid like a smiley face. I do enjoy those. And if you want to see more, subscribe. And if you really want to see more of these videos, I do have a Patreon and now a YouTube membership thing. Becoming a member now gives you access to the Teddy K emote. Make sure you stay tuned for next time when we fight the ocean.